Hello, my name is Andrew Campbell, and this is another Wireshark video in my series of hide and seek. And I thought it would be fun to do a little video today on some of my initial process when I'm given a Wireshark capture. Now, I'm kind of going off of basing this on that I've never seen the particular network, and so kind of you can get there's two trains of thoughts. You're looking at a Wireshark capture for a network that you know really well, and so when you see IP addresses, you know immediately what that asset is. And then there's the other flip side where you're given a Wireshark capture and you have no idea what assets are being shown in the capture, and it's up to you as the analyst to go through and look at the packets and sort of like piece together what you're looking at. And so for our demonstration today, I'm going to show you some of my initial steps that I use when I'm looking at a capture that I have no idea what the assets are. And so I have three primary steps that I do, just so I can get a good grounding on what I'm working with. Number one, the very first thing that I do whenever I get a capture is I actually I it may seem silly, but I take a look at what's going on and the colors that I'm looking at, and I do a quick scan. I want to take note of the protocols that are in use. So let's go ahead and do this with this particular capture that I'm working with today. So first things first, we can see we got TCP. That makes sense. TCP. We have some Kerberos happening. So some authentication is occurring. Let's keep going down till we see something that stands out. A lot of TCP, a lot of Kerberos, DNS. Okay. We got a change up here. We got SMB, server message block. Yeah. LDAP. Kerberos. I'm about halfway through our capture here. And I'm really just flying by because what I want to know is just high level, what are the primary protocols that we're seeing in action. So let's jump over and let's make a note of that. Okay, so I know that in my capture that these were some of the primary protocols that I saw, and it's important to make note of that because these protocols are really the language that assets on a network are using to communicate with one another, right? We've got our lightweight directory access protocol, we've got our Kerberos, we've got our TCP, we've got our server message block, right? And each of these things are important because they are the avenue that machines are able to talk to each other. Okay, when I see certain protocols, I'm able to make some assumptions when I go in to dig a little bit deeper that I'm going to be working with potentially, maybe I'm working with an internal DNS. Okay, maybe there's some kind of file access happening, or a transfer of file, or a creation of a file, something maybe with a file server. TCP you're going to always see because that's a connection-based protocol. Kerberos, all right, right. That is going to be a clear sign that there's some kind of authentication happening. That this capture is showing that a user on a machine is trying to access a whatever, right? At this point, we don't know. And lightweight directory access protocol. I mean, that tells us right away that they're somewhere in that capture. We're probably playing around with a domain, a DC. Okay, so let's go to the next step. So that was the very first one. Basically, I just want to like get a high level look at what kind of protocols we're playing around with. Okay, go back to the top. And my second step, when I'm just starting to get to know a capture and put pieces together, I like to go and look at the endpoints. Go to statistics, go down to endpoints, and this is kind of a nice capture, right? It's pretty simple. We've got 2.9, 3.9, 6.9, and a 3.255. Okay. Now, this is nice to look at because we've only got 4 machines here. If this was a much more expansive capture, we would have way more IP addresses. We'd have external ones, we'd have websites, um, but there's some information we can glean from this, right? We know right away that we are working with some private networks. Okay, 2, 3, and 6. We've got 3 separate networks right here. This is a class C. Okay, we can make some assumptions here. We can figure that if there's a communication between potentially 6.9 and 3.9, that these are on a separate network, and that we've got a machine somewhere in the middle that is doing routing for this relationship. So I would make note of this. So I would go back to my document here, 3.9, 6.9, 2.9. And those are the networks that I'm working with. Okay. Now, let's go back into our window here, our endpoints. When I look at this, I can see that 3.9 and 6.9 have a fairly close to the same level of or number of packets. Okay, 255 is only 1, 2.9 is only 17. So what that would tell me is that this particular asset may not be accessed as much. Well, obviously, because it's only 17. But that also means that it's not a machine that needs to be accessed. Okay. Um, but clearly 6.9 and 3.9 are doing a lot of communicating. They may be communicating with each other. When I see packets that are very similar in numbers like this, I say maybe they're chatting with each other. They might not be, but that's where I want to step farther into this capture and try to get a better picture of what we're working with here. Okay, let's continue on. So really, that's the second step that I do. I want to look at the endpoints. I want to make some assumptions, and then what I want to do after that is I'm going to dig deeper and then sort of validate and check if my assumptions are even remotely close. If they're not, then that's fine. Just take a note of that and build an accurate picture. Okay, so that was part 1 and 2 of my 3-step process when I'm getting to know a new capture. My third step is, since I've got my list of assets that I'm trying to understand better, and I have a list of protocols that are being used in this capture, right now I want to get a better idea of like which asset is using what protocol to communicate out to other machines or assets. So how we would do that is with a really quick filter. Okay, so we're going to take a look. IP source equals the 6.9 machine. So I'm going to hit enter on that, and let's go to the top. And we've got our source as 6.9, and over here we're going to be its destination, and it's going to be chatting at that destination on a particular port. Okay, and so what we're going to do here is we're going to sort of like make an assumption based on the port and the protocol that this machine 6.9 and this machine, whatever the destination is, we're going to take some guesses. Okay, as long as you validate that guess afterwards, then it's fine. We're just getting to know this particular capture, this particular network. So 6.9, it's talking to 3.9 on port 88, and it's it's attempting to establish a connection, three-way handshake. Okay, we know that port 88 is typically used in Kerberos, and if we go down a couple more packets here, we can see that the protocol Kerberos is in action. So 6.9 is talking to 3.9 on port 88 using a Kerberos protocol. All right, uh, we can put some thoughts together on this, right? Why would 6.9 want to be talking to 3.9? Well, typically in a computer environment, there is a machine that's on the domain, and it wants to validate or authenticate to an authoritative server that's going to say, hey, yes, this machine and the user that's using that machine is in my Active Directory and they are okay, or it's going to say, no, it's not okay, denied. Okay, and we can make some assumptions here. We can say that, you know what, right away, I'm 3 packets deep into this thing from this filter, and I'm thinking that 6.9 is a user machine. Authentication attempts are happening with 3.9. You know, I'm kind of thinking that the Active Directory lives on this domain controller. I'm starting to think that 3.9 is a domain controller. All right, perfect. Let's keep going. All right, remember we're just looking at 6.9 as the source. We see a lot of Kerberos happening, some connections, still port 88, and things change up a little bit. All of a sudden, we are still with 6.9, and destination 3.9 is SMB, server message block. And if we keep going down, we're going to see that a lot of that SMB is towards 3.9. Now, this is another important piece, because what that's telling me is that 3.9 has a high chance of having multiple services on this machine. Not only was 6.9 authenticating to 3.9, it is also accessing a file create request on this very machine, 3.9. Okay, 3.9 seems like an important machine here. Okay, there's authentication happening against it, and there's some files that are potentially being saved there. Let's keep going down and see if anything massive changes. And nothing major really jumps out at me. Now let's look at the other machines here. We had 3.9. We just looked at 6.9 as a source. Now there's only 17 packets, remember, that coming that involved 2.9. Let's modify our filter so that we can see 2.9. Let's see what happens. All right. So right away, we can see that the DNS protocol, remember that was one of the protocols we pointed out, and the source here communicating with 3.9. We know that 3.9 has some files potentially on it, that it is authentication, so it's probably a domain controller. And we have a machine here, 2.9, which is on a completely separate network than 3.9. It's communicating towards what we believe to be a domain controller. Okay, and it's using the protocol of DNS. All right, interesting. What this is telling me is that in this network we've got multiple different segments happening, in that we've got particular machines that are doing a particular job. All right. 2.9 is a high probability that it's a server that's dedicated to DNS. It's doing the service of DNS, and that our domain controller is using this server over here as its primary DNS server. Okay, so those are my three primary things that I do when I first get a packet capture that I'm unfamiliar with. I take a look at all the protocols that are in play, because I've seen these protocols. I kind of have an idea of how they're used, which leads me to my next step, where I look at endpoints. I get a good idea of like what is the private addresses that are happening here. Is there different networks that are in play? In this one we had 3 different networks: the 2 network, the 3 network, and the 6 network. Okay, I know based on that there's segmentation that's in play. Okay, which is great. Which leads me to my third step in my process, where I look at the source IP, and I look at how is that source IP using that particular protocol, and which machine is it communicating with. And based on those 3 steps, I'm able to piece together a loose idea of what is actually happening on this network. All right, if you found this video informative, that would be awesome. If you could like it, subscribe, that would be great. There's a lot of more videos coming along, um, all security related. All right, thanks everyone, and have a good one. Bye.